and you're cool. You got the shiny boots, the shiny badge. You're ready to roll. You're going to solve crime. And I want you to do that. But you also got to take a breath and realize that crime's been around a long time. You're not going to fix it overnight. You're in it for the long haul. So if you want to be a SWAT guy, you can go be a SWAT guy. If you want to be a bomb tech, if you want to be a canine handler, if you want to be a detective, and a detective can be homicide, robbery, sexual assault, burglary, whatever you want. If you want to be a hostage negotiator, find things that interest you.
Hey, Doug Fifer, welcome to Tales from the Shift. How are you today, sir?
Good. Hi, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you just start us out, give a basic idea of what you did as Alaska police officer?
Yeah, well, first off, I think being an Alaska cop's one of the coolest professions in the world. One, you have a beautiful state. I'm biased. I was born and raised there. But if you've never been to Alaska, definitely get up there, put it on your bucket list. It's pretty cool. One thing I'll tell you is Alaska cops, they definitely freeze their ass off. This winter is one of the coldest on record. I have a brother that lives in North Pole, Alaska, which is just outside of Fairbanks, kind of smack dab in the middle of our state. And he sends me his home temperature every night, and it's 60 below zero. That's the core temperature. That's not wind chill or anything like that. That's brutal. Anchorage, where I live, has been minus 16 to 20 below. But we're right on the inlet, so you have a lot of wet. So that's pretty darn cold when it's wet and cold. So first off, you got to be kind of special to be an Alaska cop. Tons of gear in that type of weather. Sometimes it becomes difficult, but I think that's the main difference between us working law enforcement and our counterparts like in the lower 48.
Yeah, cool. So who officially was your employer? Was it the city of Anchorage or?
Yep, it was the Anchorage Police Department. There's two large agencies, Alaska State Troopers, which many people have heard, and then the Anchorage Police Department. Anchorage has the most officers in the state, but our jurisdiction is typically within the Anchorage area. It's a massive city by landmass, so it's very big. But we have state authority throughout the state of Alaska. And, we'll co-work with the troopers a lot, but it's two distinctly different agencies.
Okay. So I'm picturing Alaska as it's a city, right? So I would imagine you have a lot of city type encounters, but you're saying you get further into the periphery, you also dealt with rural encounters also?
Yeah, Anchorage is about 330,000. And the main core of the town is like any other city. But then as you sprawl out to the country or the hillside or that area, it becomes, a little more rural. And then oftentimes we'll work with the troopers on some type of specialty call if you had to go out like as a hostage negotiator to assist them. And that might be in a different village or a town outside of Anchorage. So we did that, not often, but once in a while we worked with them.
Awesome. So why did you choose to become a cop in the first place?
Well, I think when we're all young, we need a career, a job, and we kind of think through, what the hell we're going to do in life. I wanted something that was different, change, had some action in it, wasn't boring in my mind. And I remember I had met a Maryland state trooper traveling when I was a kid at a baseball game. And he was just the coolest guy I ever met. He was very nice to us. Our family was from Alaska. Everybody thinks that's cool. So he kind of took care of us a little bit. And I always remembered looking at him thinking he was kind of like a superhero to me. And I thought, boy, when I grow up, maybe I want to do something like that. So I looked into it, as a young person, and I applied for the Anchorage Police Department and the troopers that we talked about at the same time. Well, the Anchorage Police Department hired me, and then the troopers offered me a job 3 days later. But I'd already accepted, so I did my 25-year career in Anchorage, although I'm sure I would have been happy at either agency.
Yeah, right. I do remember watching a few different documentaries that might have been some sort of cop reality type shows or whatever in Anchorage and the surrounding area. And I did find it interesting that one of the issues was alcoholism, dealing with a lot of the smaller villages and what have you. Is that pretty common that there's issues with violence plus alcoholism and things like that?
Yeah, tons of it, more per capita than other states in Alaska. I think it contributes. You have eight months of winter, a lot of darkness. You may not see the sun for a while, so you get that depression. People tend to medicate with alcohol and drugs, which only fuels, law enforcement interactions. So Alaska is unique in that sense. It's too bad that we have that, but certainly an issue.
Yeah. What are some of the other challenges you have in Alaska besides obviously weather?
I think some of the perception is Alaska is very independent, the land of the free, and it's a cool place to be. But we have our fair share of crime, which I don't think people understand. Per capita, we have the most serial killers in the United States. We have a lower population, but we've got a lot of them. So I think when people think that Alaska's, this chill place with cabins, we have crime just like everywhere else. We have sophisticated police departments, which is very good for our community to arrest these individuals. But I often tell people it's the most beautiful place on earth, but also can be one of the most deadliest.
Yeah. Do you think the high per capita of serial killers is because if you're that type of person, you kind of get away a lot easier. You can kind of recess into the distance and not have a eye on you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Shane. That's my best guess. Obviously, there's no facts on exactly why, but I think we draw a lot of serial killers that come from the lower 48 to Alaska because one, they don't think that we have sophisticated law enforcement. You have a ton of land mass, so to dispose of bodies, where better to be. It's remote. You can find remote locations a lot. So we have homegrown serial killers, but we have a lot that come to Alaska transient and then start committing crimes. But I think it really is that aspect of they think they can get away with it.
Yeah. How often would you say someone disappears in Alaska and foul play is suspected, but they're just never found again?
A lot. That it happens more than, and I think that's across the U.S. So not specific to Alaska. But the problem is, when you watch crime shows, if you don't have a body, it's very difficult to convict somebody on murder. It can be done. It's just rare. The body's important. So when a body goes missing, if we don't find it, we don't have any access to it, we don't know what happened. We can search all we want for a missing person or suspicious death, we call them. But if they disappear, and it's hard to track that. Evidentiary wise, it's hard to make arrests, even though we might suspect somebody of the crime. We really need to find that body to be able to convict. So there's tons of missing persons reports. Sometimes they move out of the state to the lower 48. We never hear from them again. They're involved in drugs or some other type of crime. Sometimes they disappear from the face of the earth and probably a victim of a homicide. One thing in my experience is when you look at financial records of individuals and all aspects of that cease and desist, meaning there's no ATM withdrawals, there's no credit card use, there's no withdrawals of cash from the bank, very likely that person is dead. Unless they have planned that long in advance and had tucked away a lot of money to be able to disappear, extremely rare. So in my experience, if their bank account stops being used, they're probably dead.
Oh, wow. I have so many questions. So how many times have you had a situation where a person intentionally tried to disappear, but then kind of fell apart and you guys figured out that, no, they're living up in, north of Fairbanks or whatever?
Yeah, it's typically they'll leave the state. You got to be really dumb if you're going to stay in the state and try and get away with that. But typically they'll leave the state, and it could be something where they've embezzled from their employer, taken a lot of money, and then faked a suicide or some aspect of that. Typically it's very easily solved. Again, we go back to the financial records. It's hard to hide that. People need money to live. So that's 99%. That's how we track them and get them arrested. Unless you're really good, and then we probably wouldn't catch you. Meaning if you tucked away cash for a ton of time and you were able to leave the country. But I think that'd be so rare that probably counted on one hand.
Yeah. How often was a John Doe found by by anybody where you had a body and it was you never figured out even who the person was or how they got there?
A lot more than you would think, sadly. One of the cases I worked, which I'll always remember, I was on a crime scene response team. We would go out on any homicides, suspicious deaths, and kind of like CSI, we'd forensically map that scene. Cops did it because it's evidentiary, meaning injuries to the body. We would do autopsies with the ME to document any injuries. We had what we called a torso killer. And what that individual was doing was killing females and then throwing them in our body of water around Alaska, which has a lot of silt and violent tides. It tears it apart. It was only the torsos, and we couldn't identify the bodies because you literally had no head, arms, legs. One of the individuals we were able to identify from a tattoo on her lower back, only one of them. And then subsequently, we never caught that individual. There's no question in my mind that if they weren't dead, they weren't incarcerated, that they're still committing crimes like that to this day. Perhaps they moved out of Alaska, Perhaps they got arrested for something else. Hopefully they died and are not committing these crimes anymore. But it happens a lot in instances like that. And then again, if people come up to Alaska, perhaps into drugs, prostitution, and they're killed and there's no, they're not an Alaska resident or anything, it's hard to identify them. Again, with fingerprinting and DNA now, familiar DNA where we can trace back on your family, it's a lot easier to identify you now.
You said there was the largest amount of serial killers in the United States. If you had to guess, how many would you think are active in Alaska?
That's always a tough one. So crimes are similar. So as investigators, we try and look at them to see if there's certain details that are the same. Again, if we find bodies that are heavily decomposed, meaning they're out in remote locations, we don't find them for a long time, it's hard to identify unless you've been shot by a gun, unless you've been stabbed by a knife. If you were strangled or something like that, we're not going to be able to tell. Typically, sometimes we will, depending on injuries to the neck and areas, but very, very difficult to establish how many. At any given time, there's probably a serial killer operating, certainly within the United States and probably in Alaska. I don't know of any active currently, and I'm still in touch with, coworkers that I've retired, but they're still actively employed. Doesn't mean there aren't any at this point, but just it's hard to tell and you never know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk more about your career. So was there any time when you said, I'm quitting, and obviously changed your mind?
Never a direct time where I said I was quitting. I actually loved the job every minute for 25 years. Like, I think it's the best thing in the world is to get up in any profession you have and you're not like, damn, I have to go to work. It's not Friday yet. I just love doing that type of work. It's almost like a chess match. Your job is to go out and catch criminals, right? Their job is to get away from you. So who's going to be best there? So much fun, right? You're just playing a game constantly, even though it's real life. But I really enjoyed it. The part when I was like, this is too much and I wanted to quit was any child victim, right? A child homicide, a child victim in death. Those were very emotional for me. I have kids. So those kind of tax me the most. But then being righteous, your job is to find that individual, arrest them, turn them over to the prosecutor, get them convicted, put them away for your community. So I would immediately pivot to that. But those were the toughest for me is kids that were killed.
Yeah. I talked about this on a different episode, but I remember seeing this video on YouTube where some police officers, I don't remember what city it was, but they pulled over a woman. There was two women in the car actually, and it turned out the woman had dead children in the back of the car. I don't know if you've seen this video, but what I found very interesting was the police officers that were there on the scene, they freaked out. I mean, and especially the ones that had young children at home. And so it was a lot of it was them trying to calm each other down over the situation. They just found these decomposing children in the back of the car. But I don't know, it struck me as interesting, very human, to see the human side, even though it's just a typical cop show of them pulling someone over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I think that that's probably common in our profession. And then coworkers are great because you can talk to each other. We take care of each other. So, we'd work through that and have support amongst ourselves, which is good. Ultimately, we've got to do our job, process that crime scene as tough as it is. Kids was the toughest.
Yeah. What about, let's say someone says, okay, I want to be an Alaska cop. What's the process? What would they do?
Well, if you've never been to Alaska, I'd say visit there first and make sure that you're ready to roll in 8 months of winter. Being born and raised there is one thing, but if you're coming from a different state, you should probably check it out. We've had lots of officers that we've hired from out of state that simply don't like that amount of winter. And I get it, right? 8 months is a long time. It can be tough if you're not used to the cold. But if you love outdoors, you love Alaska, you love a lot of landmass, become a cop. A couple things is you have to be fairly clean in your lifestyle. Not perfect. We don't actually want perfect people because they're not the best. But you can't be a prolific robber or burglar in your past and then apply to be a cop. So pretty clean means you can have some traffic tickets, speeding, things like that. You could have done some thefts in your life when you were younger and, nothing too big. Secondly is drug use. You can't have massive drug use for obvious reasons. If you smoked a little weed or did some edibles or something, there's a forgiveness period, right? The younger you are, the better. Meaning if you're 25 or older and you're committing petty thefts and doing drugs, probably not ever going to be a cop, at least not in Alaska. And then education, a bachelor's degree or college degrees, very preferable. You don't have to have it, but again, there's typically a lot of competition for these jobs. So that's very beneficial to have that. Doesn't have to be in law enforcement. We'll take any degree. So those are the 3 type things to get you core in the door to become a cop, I'd say are the most important.
And then, so the person shows up, is there like a test or something, or some sort of vetting process besides background check that someone would go through?
Yeah, massive vetting process, as it should be for law enforcement. You have a lot of power as a cop, right, in our communities. So you should be vetted extremely well. So when I hired in 1996, there was over 5,000 applications, qualified applications. That just means they got the first tier through, no criminal things like that, for 28 positions. So very competitive. A little bit less now because, as you know, not many people are going into law enforcement. Harder to recruit. There's more competition. But what I'd say, you do a initial background. You have to pass it. They'll check criminal. Might speak with a couple neighbors, contact a couple employers. They'll invite you to a written test. That's to make sure that you can read and write, answer some basic questions. And then you have a physical test. Make sure that you're physically fit enough to do the job. You'll have a psychological test. That's with a psychiatrist. Kind of go through your demeanor, how you are, make sure you're not too aggressive. Then you'll do a polygraph. So the polygraph's going to check all those boxes that you said I've never done this, or this. They're going to double verify it. And then you'll go to a panel, which typically involves the chief of police, some captains, lieutenants that will look at everything combined. And again, during this period, they're going to contact more your family members, your neighbors, your employers, but in person and really get in-depth interviews. And then they'll tender you an offer for the job. If you're accepted, it doesn't stop there. You're going to go to an academy for 4 months. And that's where instructors such as myself or other senior officers will teach you how to be a cop, in essence. More book work, practical firearms, things like that. If you graduate the academy after 4 months, then you'll go into field training. And that's about 3.5 to 4 months where you'll ride with field training officers, different ones, different shifts, and then they'll check you off. If you complete all that, which takes about a year, then you're called a solo officer. You're a new rookie on the street. You're turned loose on a shift, and you're off and running.
In Alaska, is marijuana, is it legal in Alaska?
Yeah, great question. So marijuana is interesting. In 1971, we have Raven versus State, which legalized marijuana in Alaska. We were way ahead of the national curve now. Now, what was interesting for cops is you could possess marijuana in your house. You could have 4 plants or less, but you couldn't transport it. So what was interesting is, well, how would you get it in your house was always the quandary for cops, right? But you couldn't have massive grow operations and then sell it. That was still illegal. But you could possess it for your own personal use. The only time we really busted people was when they had these large grows and they were selling it. But it's been legal in Alaska forever. It's since now we have retail stores in Alaska, much like other states have. So it's expanded from there. But boy, ever since I was a cop, marijuana was, quasi legal.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder about the average Alaska citizen who applies to become a cop, and it's legal there. So I would imagine, are we just getting to the point? Let's say someone's background check is everything's perfect. They've never even committed a crime. We just need them to the point where they can pass the drug test, basically, and not be popping hot for weed and then stay off cannabis, or are they allowed to have cannabis?
Yep, no cannabis for cops. And here's why. So an employer can prohibit employees from doing anything, right? So they can, and that's your option to take the job or not. You don't have to. It's a free country. Smoke all the weed you want. But APD will tell you can't smoke weed while you're a cop. You don't like it, you don't have to take the job. If they pop you and you're hot on a P test, you're going to get terminated. That's just facts of life. When I applied, you could have extremely low marijuana use, meaning if you had it under 21 and it was 3 years ago, they probably consider you for hiring. If you're 21 and older and you smoke weed, you're probably never getting the job. It's since changed for the very fact that you said is, a lot of our kids, I say kids 17, 18, 19, do edibles or smoke weed. Probably shouldn't prohibit them from ever for being a cop. So the new standard is minimum of 12 months. You can't have smoked or, taken weed or edibles or whatever. Likely it's to keep in mind though, if they have you, Shane, as a candidate and somebody else that hadn't done it in 5 years, they're probably going to pick option B. So the longer you can go without using weed or any drug, is important. If you get into harder core drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine, probably not getting the job. Not impossible, but there'd have to be a 10-year break in there, and you had to be pretty young. So drug use is pretty important. Marijuana is the least of them, so they have some leeway there.
Okay. All right. I'm sure someone watching this is going to need that question answered for them. Okay. How about pay? What was it like what's it like at the beginning for an Alaska cop, and then kind of move us through time through a career?
Yeah, for your listeners, I started in 1996. So when I went to the academy, you went to the academy 5 days a week, standard recruit, you're brand new, but I got $17.20 an hour. But in 1996 times, I thought I'd hit the lottery. That was a great paying job. And so I did my 4 months in the academy. I went into field training, and I was immediately bumped up, I'd say, to about 25-ish an hour out in, training in the field. And then subsequently, within 5-ish years, I'd moved up to 50 plus an hour. Now, fast forward to specialty teams, overtimes, things like that. Current officers at the Anchorage Police Department probably are in the range of $200,000 to $300,000 a year. Now, your listeners are going to think, wow, that's a ton of money. Why are they making so much? Well, that's not going to be your standard 40-hour work week. I can promise you that. So a ton of that's going to be in overtime, right? It's not the standard, you go to work 8 hours a day and you're gone. There's a ton of work in there. But I think that range of $200,000 to $300,000 now for a 5+ year cop, easily accessible, at least in Anchorage. We have different pay scales throughout the country, but a lot of those have even caught up. Alaska's heavily oil influenced. We have a lot of state funding through oil. So I think our pay is a little bit higher than what other agencies are, especially if you get down to the South.
Let's talk about pension. Is there a pension?
So there was a pension when I was there. About 20 years into my career, as a lot of state legislatures do throughout our nation, they took away the pension. So any new hires would not be pensionable. And it's a cost saving thing. That's what they always lean to. But what it does, it doesn't hold the officer in Anchorage. If I don't have a pension, I'm free to go to Denver, Colorado, which has a pension, to any other one, some in Washington or whatever state. I was fortunate enough, it held me there, meaning at 20 years, I could take a pension with pay. At 25 years, I'd have medical and a pension. So, of course, I did the 25 years. That's no longer the case. New officers, in essence, have a 401k like everybody else has. The state's currently always trying to change that, meaning there's legislation to say, hey, let's put a pension back. But that fight's been going on for years. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. All right. Let's change gears a little bit. Surrounding Anchorage, I'm going to assume there are several native tribes. Can you tell us what they are roughly in your area there? And what is it like interacting with their law enforcement?
So good question. Our Alaska Native tribes are a little different than the lower 48 tribes. So I won't explain it too much, but in the lower 48 with American Indians, they created reservations. And that was a system, and they typically have their own police force on a reservation. In Alaska, we set up corporations for Alaska Natives. And those are almost entity. Think of Microsoft, things like those. That's how they operate. They don't really have reservation land. We have lands, but not reservation lands where you would have tribes with police forces. So very rare that they have them. There are some outlying out of our jurisdiction that would have police forces. It's not like a state trooper or Anchorage police officer. A little bit different. So different animal in Alaska. But we do have tribes surrounding our area and throughout Alaska. My family's originally from Ketchikan, Alaska, which is southeast, and that's where the Tlingit Indians lived. I'm Tlingit, so I was born in Homer, Alaska, but my mom and all my family come from Ketchikan. So in different areas of Alaska are different tribes that operate, but most of them do not have their own police force.
Okay, so then if there's a tribe that's nearby Anchorage, the Anchorage police would just go ahead and handle the situation then.
Exactly. And a tribe that's non-accessible by road or not close, the troopers would in essence fly in, and they would be the law enforcement entity there. They do have village public safety officers in those villages, some of them, but they don't really have the same sworn oath as a police officer. So they have limited powers. So if there's a murder in a village, the troopers actually have to get on an airplane and fly in. Everybody in that village knows they're coming. That'd be a little scary for me because even the suspect who committed the homicide knows you're coming. There's no way to sneak in or hide it. So that'd be really interesting to me if I was a trooper.
Okay. What about, I'm going to assume it's all over the board, but what about shift work, nights, weekends, holidays? I mean, you're going to do it all. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think cop work's based like a lot of jobs on seniority. So as you get more seniority, you can kind of pick your own days off. You can bid shifts. And if you're senior enough, you're going to get them. But boy, when I started, I was thrown around like a redheaded stepchild. I could be on day shift. I could be on mid shift. I could be on swings. We worked 4 10s minimum. So we had 3 days off a week, which was phenomenal. But my days off could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the next shift, and so on. When I became senior, then I kind of picked my shifts, what teams I wanted to work on, what days off I wanted. That's kind of, you get that for being around a while, similar to any other profession. But boy, it's tough work, especially if you have a family and kids and you got to be on mid shift for a year. You're trying to turn around and wake up when your kids get up. That can be very draining. So when I got off mid shift, I didn't miss it just because I had little kids, and that turnaround's so difficult to do, even on your days off, right? You have to stay awake and then flip it. And then your time off's gone and you got to flip it back to work mid shift. So I never missed that. I love the work on mid shift. It's cool being out there, doing the job, but boy, that sleep schedule with a family is tough.
Yeah. So you're saying it was straight, you might be in a situation where it's straight mids or straight swings or what have you. It's not a rotating.
It's a rotating where you're going to be minimum of 4 months on a shift, and likely longer. So if you have no seniority, you might be on mids for a couple of years. You might go to mids to swing shift. Yeah, it's nothing quick. You're not rotating every 2 or 3 weeks. No way. You're in it for a while.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm familiar with air traffic, obviously. In air traffic control, we always had the shifts rotated through a week. So like here in Chicago, we generally would start with swings, then you go into days, and then you go into mids in the same week. So you kind of, 2 swings, 2 days, maybe a mid, maybe, I don't know, it depends, but it varies. But I can't imagine being on straight anything. I don't think I've been on straight anything really most of my life. That sounds pretty rough to be on straight mids or straight swings also. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Or straight days, either one. I think in police work, because it's a 10-hour shift, but you're going to be much longer, typically 12, 15 hours if you have a major incident, a lot. So I think it makes sense to do it for 3 or 4 months straight, because you got to flip your schedule. Then you're on your sleep schedule. If you did 2, 2, and 2, or you'd be too screwed up to do that, like trying to flip sleep schedules. And then again, once you get seniority, you can kind of settle into your career. You're going to have to do 3 to 4 years before you can start picking what you want. And then it kind of mellows out. So you're paying it up front, but it's nice later.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, quick time out. I just want to say that if you'd like to come on the show, email me at talesfromtheshiftpodcast@gmail.com. We'll talk about your shift. Let's talk about peers. What was it like with your fellow police officers in Alaska? Fun, competitive, toxic, great friends? What do you got?
Yeah, I absolutely love them. I love them all to this day. We talk to them, we shoot the shit all the time, whether they're retired or they're still working. I was a field training officer, so I trained a ton of cops in their career growing up. So I still interact with them all the time. Really, Anchorage Police Department, unbelievable place to work. Very little toxic type behavior with anybody. Once in a while, you'll have it, but competitive only in, let's say, firearms, defensive tactics, things like that, where you're all in a group. Extremely competitive, but in a fun nature, not putting anybody down or anything like that. Played a ton of practical jokes on each other, just as coworkers. It's fun to do. So that was really the atmosphere. I love going to work. I loved interacting. Every once in a while, you get a coworker, you're like a little off-putting or rubs you the wrong way, but very little in my 25 years.
You said practical jokes. Was there anything in particular that happened to yourself?
I did a ton. I mean, I ran rampant, and cops tend to amplify their practical jokes. I mean, very extreme. Again, we deal with a lot of stress, so it's kind of an outlet amongst ourselves to have fun. I would always make fun of traffic cops. It's not that I don't like traffic cops, but their whole goal in life is to go out and ticket community members, and they like it. I hated that. I didn't write any traffic tickets, or very few in my entire career. But they're a different breed of officer, and so normal line officers would make fun of them. So I had an officer that was running radar. I happened to be working patrol on a side street that I think the speed limit was 35 or 40 miles an hour. I had a Crown Vic at the time. So I floored it as fast as I could. And we had these little mobile computers. So I see on my screen, I think he put like 85 miles an hour. So I was like, I can do better than that. So I turned it around, floored it, got over a little bit over 100. Now, again, shouldn't have been doing it, but we're having a little bit of fun here. But that's as fast as the Crown Vic would go, literally 100. But I had a sports car at home. So I had this genius idea. If I drive home, get in the sports car, and then speed down this road, he won't know that it's me, the cop, right? And it'll be this fun game and it'll be funny. So I did it. I got in the sports car and I hit a well over 100 miles an hour. Well, he didn't know it was me as a cop. I'm in a private car, not my patrol car anymore. So he came after me, stopped me. Once he realized it was me, he threw his hands up. We had a good laugh. I didn't know this at the time, but a citizen had seen this and called into dispatch and said, I saw this suspicious cop with a police officer in another car, and they kind of were shooting the shit afterwards, and it was weird. So the sergeant calls us later. Well, one thing in police work you can't do is lie, and nor should you be able to. It's a kiss of death. You can get away with a lot of stuff. You can make a lot of mistakes, but if you lie, you're going to get fired. And I think that's fair. So the sergeant asked if we knew anything about it, and we had to tell him the truth. So that's I call my only day on the beach. And to your listeners, that means you get a day off where you're suspended. It's my only day on the beach in my career. It was for a fun thing. I obviously shouldn't have done it, but it was a practical joke that I couldn't help myself from doing. It worked out very well between us, but the citizen saw it, and then I had to pay the price.
Yeah, that's in air traffic. They call it being on the beach also. So,
yep.
Yeah, I was never on the beach, but guess I got lucky. Okay. Slang terms. Can you tell us some slang terms that people in your job might use and toss around?
Yeah, a little one, like 10-5, and we call that. That's where officers meet up, and that just means to chit-chat. So we'll say 10-5 at a certain location. Maybe the town's quiet, you just want to talk. So that's kind of our personal term on let's just talk about nothing because it's been a stressful shift and hang out for a bit. Ride the lightning. I'm guessing your viewers can guess what that is. That's a taser. So when we would tase somebody, we would say they rode the lightning. And tasers are very effective. It was one of my favorite tools because I didn't have to fight. I can tell you 10 times I'd pull out that taser. Everybody would give up because they didn't want to be tased. I loved it. Before, you had to scrap a little bit more. I'm not the largest of size, so I didn't like to fight. So the taser was a nice tool. The last one maybe is like a knock and talk. And for listeners that don't know what that is let's say that I think you're selling drugs in your house, or you have some criminal element in your house, Shane. But I don't have enough to get a warrant. I don't have witnesses. I don't have any actual buys or anything like that. I would simply come up to your door and knock and start talking to you, invite myself in. If you accept it, I would come in, and I solved a ton of crimes that way. I had no warrant. I had no absolute right to be there. But remember, if a citizen lets you in or they talk to you, that's all free evidence for you. So knock and talks were very effective in our day. I would do it all the time.
Like a vampire. If you invited me, you invited me in now.
Yeah. You'd be surprised because people want to put off that they're clean and there's nothing going on. So they're overly helpful. In the end, obviously, for criminals, that comes back to bite them.
Okay. So I'm curious about, let's say you go to work, you have let's say it's a 12-hour shift. So it's a long shift, and you come back into what I would call the real world. So now you're at home with your family. Was there a little bit of a transition at all to get out of that mindset? Did you ever, I don't know, did it ever spill out on them? For me personally, I would come back wired sometimes from being a controller, and I would be very aggressive with my wife would be like, "Hey, you're up here. You need to, come." And so it's almost like I had to take a step back. I'm curious if there was anything like that for yourself.
Yeah, my demeanor is pretty chill and calm. Like regardless, I could be at a homicide scene right now, and I'd probably be talking to you the same way. That's just my demeanor. I think it helps me as a cop. But what I would do, to your point, is if I'm on a negotiation that takes 12, 15 hours, I'm mentally taxed, exhausted, I'm amped up, you're wired, you can't sleep. I hit the gym every single time at the end of shift. Just did a real hardcore workout. Then went home, chilled me out, relaxed me. I think that was the best medicine for me ever. And I was very focused on that. So I could shut it off at home, meaning I left it. Didn't mean I didn't talk to my wife or family about what had happened in my day, but I shut it down and I was family guy during that time, and I didn't let it bleed over. There are cops that do that, and it's very tough on their careers. They have a lot of depression. Maybe they get into alcohol themselves to, cope with that. But again, I think that solid workout at the end burns off a little bit of that stress. You reset yourself, go home, and it's a new day.
Yeah. What about divorce rate in that career? Do you think it's average, higher? Or
I
what do you think?
got to say higher. I think again, if you're not dealing with it right with your family, if a lot of officers that I talk to don't ever talk to their spouse or partner about the career. I was just the opposite. It's not that I gave insider or confidential information to my wife, but if she asked me what happened, I tell her about my day. If it was a homicide or robbery or whatever it was. So I think that communication is important. A lot of officers would say, I don't want to talk about it. Don't worry about it. It was my day. I found most of those probably didn't last as a marriage. And maybe that officer learned the second time around. That's probably not the best way forward. So I think talking through it with family members is a good thing. But I'd say the divorce rate, just in my experience with friends, probably a little higher than most.
Yeah. I think being able to talk about it with your spouse seems very, very important. And even with that said, is there anything that you still didn't talk about? Really heinous things? Did you just kind of not mention it to your wife, or just let it all come out?
Yeah, my wife was very interested in law enforcement. There's nothing you couldn't tell her, homicides so I think everything was on the table. So I never held anything back from her. If she would have, if she wasn't, I certainly wouldn't tell her about a gruesome scene. That'd be inappropriate, but really there was nothing there. And I find a lot of people are interested in actual details of crimes, whether it's your spouse, family members. They really want to dig in and find out the details. Some don't like it, but more often than not, they really want the inside scoop.
Yeah. Well, we sure do right here. Okay. If you closed your eyes and pictured a veteran Alaska cop, what does that person look like to you? And is there a specific personality type?
Yeah, I don't care what they look like. What I think the personality type's what I care about. I want them to be cool, calm, collect. That's the best veteran officer. And again, don't ever sweat the small stuff. Rookies I find and people who are too amped up, everything's a crime, whether it's a $5 shoplift or a homicide. There's no differentiating the two. There's a lot of gray in law enforcement. So relax, look at it. We work for the citizens. And I find veteran officers are very good at that. They're just smooth, calm. You use the word chill, but it's important. They don't get amped up over very little things. Those are the best cops by far.
Yeah. And then from your career as a Alaska cop, do you have any permanent marks on yourself, whether injuries, tattoos, or anything that's come from the job?
Not a lot of injuries. I was very lucky. I mean, coworkers, tons of injuries, the gamut. I would say I was on a negotiation in Anchorage outside for 6 or 7 hours. It was face to face. I had to be face with this suspect. He had a knife to his throat. So it was interesting. I couldn't leave, but I wasn't dressed appropriately. It was cold and wet. So I had some frostbite on my hands and feet from that before we ended the situation. That'll rear up once in a while. If I'm super cold, I'll feel those in my fingers and hands. I didn't lose any sensation or strength, but I'll still feel that. But just a little bit of frostbite. Other than that, emotionally, I think I did very well in my career because I could separate it. Again, like we talked about earlier, the child crimes still kind of haunt you a little bit. I don't think you ever get over those. But the rest of the career, I think I dealt with very well.
Yeah. Do you think that the career has made you harder or more cynical in any way?
I think I was born cynical, to be honest with you. So, I use that term trust but verify. I like everybody. I'll talk to anybody, but really before I believe you, if I met you, Shane, at the grocery store, I'm not going to believe anything you say till I can verify it. Just because in law enforcement, you'll learn how deceptive people are constantly in every aspect of life. So that kind of jades you a little bit, but you could control it. Doesn't mean I have to be an asshole to you or a jerk, but I'm certainly going to verify what you're saying before I just dive in and believe Shane 100%. A lot of my friends and family members will just dive in on people and I have to kind of save them and say, hey, have you thought about this? This doesn't make sense to me. My Spidey sense is probably up more than other people. Just part of the career.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about career progression. So before we talk about what you ended up moving into, because I know you ended up doing a lot of things with the Alaska Police Department. Let's say someone's getting ready to be done with being a cop in general, what might they do? Where might they go after that if they continue to want to work? What are some other avenues someone might be able to move into?
Well, you could be a true crime writer. That's the first thing. That's what I decided to do. But there's tons of jobs. So I joke with people, I've never been offered so many jobs since I retired. Like when I was working, obviously I wasn't offered any jobs. But there's a lot of high profile security jobs, private sector, that they'll call you and ask you to work for them. A lot of corporations hire ex-law enforcement. A lot of professional teams hire ex-law enforcement to head their security. So there's tons of jobs out there, those type of things. Typically I was a hostage negotiator for a long time. So I've been contacted by firms that actively use negotiations for, let's say, a kidnapping in South America, where perhaps the FBI and the government aren't going to help, or they've exaggerated all theirs. You can literally armchair hostage negotiation from your couch, wherever you are in the world. That I may do someday. That sounds interesting to me. Don't really want to do it full time now, but there's a plethora of jobs, and it just depends. Like if you're a bomb tech at the APD, you have other options. If you're a negotiator, if you're a homicide detective. So whatever your specialty is, you can go into that post-career. Tons of jobs out there. And employers typically like retired police because they do a 25-year career and be clean enough to retire and go through that career dealing with the public. You're probably going to be a pretty solid employee. Not always, but the majority of the time.
If you had to define a person that this job is not for, who might want to stay home?
Yeah, I had a lot of experience with this with recruits when I did field training. The biggest issue that I had where that individual couldn't overcome was multitasking. And it sounds easy. We can all say we can multitask. We can read something. We can listen to the radio. We can look 360 around us. It sounds easy. It's not. And I don't know that you can completely teach that, meaning that I had recruits that I could help them. They had some of it. We could get them over the hump. They didn't have any of it. I found that they didn't complete the field training. They just couldn't. It's fast moving. It's fast paced. You have to make decisions split second. If you hesitate, we call it the kiss of death in law enforcement. You have to take action. You can't hesitate in these critical situations, gunfire, robberies, things like that. So those, I don't want to call it freezing. I think they froze because they couldn't multitask. They couldn't do 2 or 3 things at once. And ultimately that wasn't a career for them. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure they're very successful in whatever career they chose. It's just cop work. You got to be quick.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by multitasking? What would be a scenario where you're thinking or doing more than one thing at the same time?
Yeah, so I had an interesting robbery. I went to a gas station that was being robbed at night. It was on mid-shift. And I pulled up and I could see through the glass that the clerk was being held by gunpoint. So, of course, I jumped out. What I didn't see is that there was another guy behind him that had him at gunpoint. And then there was another guy that had him at gunpoint when I ran in. So I had 3 guys with guns, a clerk with his hands up, and I had dispatch screaming at me in the radio, "Do you need help? I'm calling for other cars because I have 3 guns." I'm looking around. I have to defuse the situation. Long story short, the robber called a cab to come rob the gas station. He got out of the cab, went in to rob it. The cab driver saw it. He jumped out with a gun, to put it on the robber, even though he brought him there. And then the mechanic in the shop had a gun in his toolbox. He ran out and put them both at a gun. Thank God nobody got shot. But what happens there, if I just froze in the situation and I couldn't answer the radio, I couldn't separate and demand everybody put their weapons down, get on the floor, and be ready to shoot whoever I had to shoot if they pointed it at me. Very critical and high stress. That's more of a funny one because you can't even write that up how dumb. A lot of people in Alaska have guns, very heavy gun state. But it's situations like that where I'd have recruits that would literally melt into the floor and freeze and not do anything. Just can't happen.
Yeah, when you first started telling the story, I thought I must have misunderstood you and that everybody had a gun on the clerk. But yours literally is just a line.
It's just a line. And the cab driver was innocent and the mechanic was innocent. It was the first guy that was guilty. And luckily he didn't shoot. He knew he's got 3 guns pointed. My gun's out too. Everybody's got guns now. So luckily he put his gun down and then I had no idea what the hell was going on, to be honest with you. Everybody got handcuffed. And then we sorted it out through interviews and video. Kind of comical, but lucky that we survived that.
It reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where all the Spider-Mans are kind of pointing at each other. You never know.
It's
hilarious. That's funny. All right. So let's say someone has gotten hired as an Alaska police officer recently. What is something you might tell them? Definitely do this or definitely don't do this.
I guess from a career standpoint, once you get hired, you're going to have to do a patrol for 3-ish years. And you're going out, you're learning, you're earning your badge, you're learning the streets, you're connecting with the public. It's very important. You need that basis for cop work. Those interactions are priceless, right? So that's the first thing they're going to do. We talked about this earlier about how to separate yourself from the job and not let the job consume you 24/7. It's so easy to have that happen. And you're cool. You got the shiny boots, the shiny badge. You're ready to roll. You're going to solve crime. And I want you to do that. But you also got to take a breath and realize that crime's been around a long time. You're not going to fix it overnight. You're in it for the long haul. So take time for yourself, whether that's working out, whether you're playing sports. I don't care what it is. Have a break from law enforcement. Don't have just cop friends. I have hundreds of cop friends, and then I have hundreds of normal friends. That's fine. But what I find is typically sometimes you'll only have police officers as friends. Not that that's bad, but then you're in that group only. You're living it over and over. You're living their stories. Healthy wise, it's good to have some channels besides cops. And then in your career, find out what you want to do in life as a cop, right? APD was extremely good. You can go to any specialty team you want. If you train, you qualify, you pass the test. So if you want to be a SWAT guy, you can go be a SWAT guy. If you want to be a bomb tech, if you want to be a canine handler, if you want to be a detective, and a detective can be homicide, robbery, sexual assault, burglary, whatever you want. If you want to be a hostage negotiator, find things that interest you. What I like to do is every 5 to 7 years is try something new, try a different specialty team, kind of, learn new things. I think that's good for being an overall cop. So I did that throughout my career. I found it very rewarding. It's not that I ever got bored in anything, but I always had the yearning. I want to do something different. I think the one thing that I did a long time, the longest, was as a hostage negotiator, but I just loved that. Like it came natural for me. And I love the interaction, calling people or interacting with them by phone or face to face and getting them out safely to protect themselves and others. So I was on that team for the majority of my career, but I loved every minute of it.
After you were hired, what did you go through and what did you learn?
Yeah, so I got hired and I did patrol for a long time. Went through the different shifts like we talked about, working mid, swings, days, overtime, extras. And then about 3 years on, which was pretty quick, I put in to be a field training officer. And what that does is any of the new recruits out of the academy would get assigned to a field training officer. And then you're in essence their boss for that month or however long they do it. And then you teach them, how to be a cop out on the streets. Very important, right? This individual is trusting in you to teach them. A lot of work, very stressful because not only do you not have to worry about yourself only, you got to worry about somebody else. So it was very taxing and stressful, but very rewarding because, you're helping them become a seasoned and a pro law enforcement officer and hopefully picking up the good traits that you instill in them, which I thought was important. So I did that for many years. Again, I think that's one of the most taxing things I did just because it's so complicated to rate somebody, to ride with them 24/7, to teach them. In the end, what we'd do is I would come in plain clothes with that recruit and they would drive themselves. So I would be on all the calls, but I would be in plain clothes, and plain clothes just means everyday dress, not in uniform. And that way, if that recruit has a call, those people don't focus on me. I want them to be able to handle it so I could properly evaluate if that recruit's handling the call. If it's an emergency, I would jump in, of course. I still had a firearm, it was hidden. But really, I want to see how they operate. We would do that for 2 weeks. And if you passed, we'd sign off and then you're your own cop. So I enjoyed that, but I wanted to do specialty teams. So then I transitioned into a crime scene response team. You would rotate a month on, 2 months off. So we had 3 teams. The team was about 5 to 7 members, but every suspicious death, every homicide, anything that was of critical importance, they would call your team out. As you can imagine, Shane, it's typically not at 1 p.m. They're calling you out. It's 2 or 3 in the morning on a shooting or a homicide. And then those scenes would take every bit of 15 to 30 hours to process. Video camera, fingerprinting, DNA swabbing, everything, the gamut. We would start, if there's a homicide in the house, we'd start at the front door and work our way into the body. After that, I would probably attend the autopsy. A lot of people would wonder, why would a cop attend the autopsy? Well, to photograph and to seize any evidence from the body, fingernail clippings, bullets, things like that. The medical examiner would do the physical autopsy. I would be there photographing, documenting the scene, the body, and then taking any evidence. So we had a chain of custody. I joked with a lot of people that being on that team, all I saw was dead people because that's all you went to is homicide scenes. But I learned a ton, a very important work, because if you don't, you've got one shot to forensically map the scene. Some departments in the lower 48 have private teams that come out and document it. In Alaska, you must be sworn. So you have to be a cop to be on that team. So I did that for a long time. There's a little burnout factor there because with family and you still had to work a regular job. You still worked patrol and other duties. You don't get a freebie because you had to work 30 hours straight. So it was exhausting. You did make a lot of overtime, a lot of money, which was good. But after doing that, 4 or 5-ish years, I retired off that. And then I joined the hostage negotiation team. Eventually worked my way up to what we call as a team leader. A team leader just operates your team. You'll have 4 or 5 members. Team leaders are kind of the liaison between our command staff and the team. So I would broker any information that we're very close to getting this individual out, give us more time. Because remember, your command staff wants to send your SWAT team in, breach the door, go in and grab them. If it's been 3 or 4 hours, I would tell them how close we are to resolving this, give us a little bit more time, kind of that push-pull. And I really did that as a team lead to the end of my career, which I enjoyed the most. And then there's probably lots of things that I did in between. I did some, we had a sexual assault team that would work forensically for sexual assaults, interviewing suspects, things like that. So throughout, there's tons of things I did. What I appreciated about APD is they would let you kind of transition and do different things in your career, which always kept it fresh and exciting. But really, it's your path. Whatever you're interested in as a cop, you can go do. And you can stay as long or as short as you want, as long as you're doing the right job.
Yeah. Let's see. So we had Justin Bocock on here, who is a homicide detective in Mesa. And one thing that he only did the homicide portion, I think, for 8 years. And he said that after a while, the PTSD and all that was really just adding up inside of him, and he kind of needed to move on and do something else. Do you feel like it was starting to affect you doing those investigations?
Yeah, there's no question. After a while, I referenced I only see dead people. That rang true in my head. And I think that what's odd is I think homicides and, when you're with somebody that was murdered, I think it physically imprints in your brain a little bit. I can remember almost everyone to this day. Not that it affects me, not in a bad way. I can just remember it. So I think that you get so involved. I think that team's a good one to be on for 4 or 5 years. Similar to crimes against children. God bless those detectives that do that. I would not want to do that long term. It's just so taxing mentally on you. So I think it's good to transition in and out of things to keep your own sanity. So I agree with them. If you did homicide for 8 years, I have buddies that did it for a lot longer than that. Boy, that's a lot of stress on you.
Yeah. And I'd like to go back for a second to when you talked about training new people. Did you ever have people transferring in who are former officers in the lower 48?
Tons of them. Yeah.
And
LAPD. One of my good friends is from Chicago PD that's still working. I talked to him. As far as that, to be honest, I would rather have a rookie, brand new civilian as my recruit than a seasoned veteran officer. And the reason being, in most circumstances, a lot of them, they were great, right? I had recruits from other departments that were just outstanding, easy peasy. They knew everything. But I had some that were so ingrained in their beliefs, whether they're from Cleveland, Ohio, or someplace, and we just didn't do it the same way in Anchorage, right? Like some of the stuff they thought they could get away with, it's absolutely not. So I thought that was the only problem I found with some of these senior officers, and frankly, some of them didn't make it, and it was for a good reason. I tell people in firearms in the academy, we actually prefer you to not have much firearm experience when you come in the academy, because we're going to teach you the right ways to shoot, the safest ways. If you've taught yourself to shoot or somebody taught you incorrectly, it's so difficult to change that because you've imprinted it in your brain to then correct it, right? But if I get you fresh, pretty easy to teach you. And then you'll do those safety features that you're taught. So I found that also people who were gun experts thought they actually really weren't. And they didn't shoot very well. And to try and train them to shoot well the right way, it was a pain in the butt.
Yeah. It's called the law of primacy. So once you learn something, if you learn it incorrectly, it's really tough to get it out of a person's head.
And it's the same way for us. I mean, I have the same problem. If I learn my golf swing sucks today. I love to golf, but I learned it incorrectly in Alaska. I just started whacking the golf ball. wrong way to do it. So now to do it right, it's painful for me. So I think we all suffer from that.
Yeah. And then earlier you were talking about how you need to find things to do outside of work. Do Alaska police officers have any type of sports leagues that they go together with?
We do, yeah. We have softball, we have basketball. I was on our APD traveling basketball team for many years. Have a blast. You go out and play different teams, meet communities. So we do all that. But I tell you what, if you like the outdoors, geez, I don't know anything beats Alaska. Hunting, fishing, cops love that. Winter sports, skiing. If your knees are too bad for downhill, you got cross country. Snow machining's big. A lot of Alaskans have cabins where you can go out remote, enjoy the wilderness. Hikes are incredible. The landscaping is beautiful. So I think that's kind of what you have to do, right? Enjoy your state, and then do things like sports or whatever, hobbies. Doesn't even have to be PD sponsored sports leagues. You could join a baseball team outside of work, which might be even better. But we did have a local APD softball team, which was a lot of fun. I played on that for many years too.
All right. Could you tell us what is the worst day you ever experienced as a Alaska police officer, or perhaps the best day, or both?
Gosh, probably the worst day I would have to say is when a colleague was killed in the line of duty. I mean, I don't think there's anything worse than that. Attending those funerals, boy, just absolutely brutal. So I think those are, by far the worst days.
How often did that happen?
I mean, fortunately, I only had it several times in my career, which is a good thing. I mean, we're a smaller department population wise, but nonetheless, I remember them like yesterday and coworkers that you worked with. And it's a little different because your other homicide victims, typically don't really know. You may know of them. They're not, but somebody in your PD family, they're family. You work with them for years and you know them, you've had them over to your house. So I think that's tough for any cop across the nation or in the world. There's no doubt. And then I think the best day I would correlate right after that is you're sad, you're heartbroken, devastated. How does this happen? Is to get right back on the horse and go out and do your job, because that's what they'd want. So I always remember that. So as tough as it was, I'd suffer for 48 hours, get my head back straight and go do the job. I think that's paying respect to that individual who did it. So that's the best day. And I think my department was great at that. We supported each other and we all kind of had that mantra. Let's suit up. Let's go out there. Let's do our jobs, because there's nothing better you could do for that individual or their family. So I think that always worked well. Never perfect, but that's got to be the toughest day as an officer killed in the line of duty.
Is there any specific person that you remember that you'll never forget from doing this job?
I had a sergeant that I went on this call, but a lady had crashed off the side of the road, and Alaska's got a ton of waters, ponds, lakes, things like that. But the vehicle had turned upside down in the water. She had escaped out. She was on the side of the road. The vehicle was mostly submerged. Stuff had floated up, but a sergeant from our department, Bob Glenn, he had responded there. First one there, vehicle accident. The lady was almost incoherent. She'd almost drowned, and medics got there. They're trying to help her. And, she's crying and just distraught. Everything was calm because she was alive. He's trying to find out if anybody else was in the vehicle, but sometimes people can't answer. But he'd actually seen a car seat floating. It had floated out of the vehicle just by itself. Nobody in there, anything like that. And he thought to himself, and the water there was murky. So he's like, shit, there could be a baby. I don't know. He actually dove in to this car underneath, murky water. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Came out. And as he came out, he had the baby in his hand and came out and was doing compressions and mouth breathing almost as he walked out. I told him, you just got to retire, put that in National Geographic. The baby lived. The baby was fine. But put it in National Geographic and just walk away, because that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my career. He didn't have to dive in there. He couldn't even see. We didn't even know there was a baby in the car. Thank God that car seat floated up and he was able to get that baby. And I think there was a picture, gosh, it is probably 15 years later in high school, where he's with that kiddo who's now, somewhat grown, but it's just the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so kudos to him. That's pretty cool.
That is actually really cool. And the mother just wasn't mentioning it. She was so out of it that she couldn't even.
Well, unfortunately, sadly, she'd half drowned. So she was really out of it. I mean, barely there. So, and she may have been, when screaming and yelling, may have been trying to, say that, but he was keen enough that when he saw that car seat, that was good enough for him, which thank God.
Yeah. Amazing. That's a really cool story. Okay. Would you be willing to reveal a time in your career when you made any types of mistakes or did something embarrassing?
Gosh, lots of mistakes, never on the criminal aspect. I told you about the sports car when I sped in it, more of a fun thing, got the day on the beach. Never anything. My internal affairs jacket's extremely clean. I wasn't by the books, but I didn't do anything to go over the books ever. An embarrassing moment I can tell you is, as cops, you have to testify in court a lot. And you should, because you write the report or you investigate the crime. You got the jury there and the judge. So I'm in the box and I don't mind talking to juries because you just tell the truth. It's pretty easy. But while I'm sitting there, I had bad sinus problems. I started to cough, almost like a tickle in the back of your throat. And I couldn't stop coughing, which is embarrassing because you're testifying and just overwhelming. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Long story short, I looked down, my pepper spray that I had, it had worn a hole in the bottom. But as the pressure leaked out, then it exploded. So then it all came, up, the pepper spray. And now I'm in full snot. But it gets to the jury and the judge, they're hacking a lung. They had to clear the whole courtroom. I look like a complete idiot. Really nothing on my own. The way it was on my belt, it wore a hole. But of all the times for that sucker to implode and explode, and then the jury had to come back in. They've all been pepper sprayed in essence. And then I got to continue to testify like a complete idiot. And I couldn't imagine what they were wondering. They're like, where'd they hire this guy at? We since changed those canisters on how they go in our belts because of that, because they would wear a little hole in them, as odd as you would think. But, the judge was none too pleased with me. It was literally not my fault, but it was. So, you got to get your ass chewed by the judge, and that's the way it goes. And you can just be professional. I tried to joke with the jury. I don't think they were in the mood after that. But we ended up getting a conviction regardless, so it worked out.
So before you went into the courtroom, I would assume they took away your weapon at the front door. Maybe now they take away the pepper sprays also.
You can still have it. You can have your taser, your pepper spray. You can't have your gun. They do that in a lockbox, but they still let you have the taser and pepper spray. Probably shouldn't after my testimony, but they do.
Right. That's pretty funny. Okay. Is there something that you remember that you learned on this job that it wasn't in any books, wasn't in the training, that you ended up learning from doing the job?
The biggest thing is, I think that for all your listeners, is criminals. That's where we go out and, we have to arrest them and keep communities safe. It's a very small portion of our community. There's so many good people out there. So I tell people it's 10% of the criminals commit 100% of the crime, right? It's a very small fraction. And yet your community is pretty solid, right? And anytime I ever needed help, Anchorage is very community oriented. Citizens would help me, whether I'm wrestling with somebody. I'd have 2 or 3 guys that come in, jump on, help me arrest an individual who's could be much larger than me. So I found that although we get jaded a little bit in law enforcement, I was always impressed on how supportive our community was and how small that fraction of criminals were, but how much crime they committed. So they'll rain terror down until you grab them and put them in jail. But there's always one behind them too. But it's a small fraction of society. So to your listeners, basically our community is pretty good. It's that little, percentage of people that wreak havoc on us. And that's why you need cops. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. All right. If you could change something about this career or job, what might it be?
Boy, I would not pick any other career. So if I could do it all over again, I'm going to be law enforcement. At the most enjoyment out of that. So I wouldn't change that. I think a lot of this, if I could change the sleepless nights, like the pain of being so tired, I'd probably change that. Can't really nap in between a homicide crime scene or something. So it is what it is. You just got to deal with it. But boy, there were some painful nights where I was delirious of sleep.
Yeah. I do remember Justin with the homicide. He said that the analogy he said he knew Navy SEALs and that they had to learn how to deal with being cold and wet. But as a homicide detective, you had to learn how to be awake for long periods of time. He said that was one of the most difficult things that he dealt with. I guess you're saying it's the same thing for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's true. Now, I couldn't do Navy SEAL stuff. I've watched those. That's insanity. Like I'm breaking down. I consider myself tough, not that tough. That's impressive. But yeah, I think sleep deprivation, it's almost like a drug or drinking alcohol. Like it does you, and you're in serious situations. You have to focus. So you got to train your mind. But there were some painful nights. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you teach us something, how to do something in your job that you can explain verbally to us?
Yeah, well, I can teach you something as a negotiator or an interrogator that you can use in
Sure.
everyday life. And we all have kids, so I'm sure that parents out there, that this is tried and true and they've already done it. But what I would often do, whether it's negotiation or interrogation, one, I'm going to be extremely friendly to you, build rapport. That's important. But then what I want you to do is I want you to explain to me what happened in detail. And I want you to go through it. And I'm just going to let you go 20, 30 minutes. I don't care however long you want. I'm not going to interject. I may ask more if you pause or something. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go completely off that. Now, mentally or even physically, I've taken notes, recorded or audio recorded, video recorded, likely. And then I'm going to go off and talk about your family, even if you're a homicide suspect. I'm going to talk about your family, any vacations you've been on, who's your favorite sports team. And we're going to divert from anything criminal for 30, 45 minutes. Let me get you coffee. Let me get you a Snickers bar. Going to be relaxed. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back in. And then I'm going to have you tell me that story. Start again. And let's go through that 20 or 30 minutes. Virtually impossible to get it right. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care if you're a sociopath or a psychopath. It's infallible in my experience that you're going to be able to recreate those lies in detail. Again, try this on your kids or your family members. Often your kids will come and ask, tell you a story. You'll ask them about it, and then you immediately know it's a lie. Same thing in interrogation. So that was one of my best tools but you have to pivot. You got to get in the 20 or 30 minutes, and then you got to go off to something else, and then you got to come back. You can't a lot of investigators will go back to back or just dive into the details. I don't really give a shit at that time. I just want your story. I'm going to come back to it, trust me, but you're not going to know I'm coming back to it. That's how you get somebody to break them off the truth or to get them in a lie, which a jury can see later.
Yeah, pretty cool. All right. Maybe this would be a good time for you to talk about your hostage negotiation stories. Do you have any interesting stories that we could hear about doing that?
Yeah, kind of a fun one. And you never know what you're going to get as a negotiator when you get called out. Is a female called into dispatch and said she was going to murder some people at the hospital, some physicians. She was going to murder her tax accountant, and she was going to kill some of her lawyers. Well, typically we can't let that slide. So they're going to go out and talk to her. But she told dispatch she's got a gun. Anybody comes around, they're going to get shot up. That's problematic for law enforcement. She was very polite on these recordings. They mobilized a SWAT team, surrounded the house, and then they called me. I grabbed another negotiator, and it wasn't a big scene, so two of us should be fine. We're in an unmarked car. We drove there. We parked down the street. The house is surrounded. I'm going to make telephone contact with her to have her come out because you can't threaten people. It's called terroristic threatenings. The hospital, she had called the hospital also and threatened them, so they were scared. So long story short, I talked to her. I built rapport. She's extremely nice on the phone. And then I want to know about her background. She tells me that she was kind of a semi-celebrity in California. She moved up here. She had plastic surgery. I asked her why she wanted to kill attorneys and doctors. Well, they had botched her plastic surgery. The attorneys wouldn't take the case. Her tax accountant had screwed up her taxes, so she wanted them all dead. I said, that's not really reasonable. She then told me she wanted to kill her 15-year-old, which kind of pinged me a little bit. So I said, where's the 15-year-old now? Well, he's at school, luckily. So we had it surrounded, so he's not coming back. I told the SWAT team and patrol, watch out for this kid because we were almost getting to school time, being getting out. And they're like, we got it locked down. Nobody comes in or out without your permission. Good enough. I asked her about her background in Hollywood. She said, well, I used to be an actress and did some other stuff. And I said, well, tell me about that because I'm trying to build rapport. So she tells me that she was a Playboy Playmate. Now, at the time in the car with my fellow negotiator, I actually hit mute on the phone. And we kind of had a little chuckle amongst ourselves because I knew there was no way in hell she was a Playboy Playmate. So we joked around. She never knew it. We went back on live and I talked her through it. What was interesting about this case is the 15-year-old kid comes home while I'm still negotiating with her and walks through our SWAT team, goes into the house, It's a split level and goes downstairs. Had SWAT run up to me and say, "You're not going to believe this." I was like, "You got to be kidding me. How does this happen?" She's on the phone with me. She doesn't know that he's in the house because it's a typical teenage kid that goes downstairs. She's upstairs. So immediately I have to, it's pucker factor. I'm going to hear a gunshot. SWAT's mobilizing to go in immediately. I hear her with the gun. I ask her what kind of gun it is. She says it's a Glock 45, same handgun I carry on patrol. So we shoot the shit about the Glock, and I asked her if she knew how to take it apart. She said she did because she cleans it every day. So I said, "Can you take it apart for me now?" And I actually heard the rack come when you disengage it, where you pull the firearm apart. I heard it. And when you shot a firearm thousands of times and taken it apart, these sounds. We told SWAT. They immediately rushed in, apprehended her. The kid's downstairs watching TV. No idea what the hell's happening. What was interesting is SWAT called me in afterwards. Typically, we'll leave as negotiators, let patrol handle it from there. We're out. We don't have to do much, but they wanted me to see something. So she had a death board with all these names on it, which was interesting. I had never seen a death board and why they should die. Her son was on it too. And her son's reason was to go to a better place because she thought the world was bad. It wasn't because she disliked the 15-year-old. She's just going to send him to a better place. But the real kicker here was over her bed was a framed Playboy Playmate centerfold of her, live and in color. She was actually a Playboy Playmate, much older at the time, but it taught me a valuable lesson that trust people, right? Trust and verify, like I told you earlier, because I totally did not believe that and almost, dismissed it. But it taught me a valuable lesson as a negotiator. Anything somebody says, you better look into it. You better research it. You better believe it on its face while you're in the moment, unless you can disprove it. So it was a good learning experience. She's actually a Playboy Playmate. She had severe psychological issues. We put her in, we got her some help. She was charged with a couple crimes, but that was an interesting call, but you never know who you're going to meet.
So I guess I'm surprised the son didn't know about any of this, that he must have been completely detached. I mean, teenagers tend to be that way anyway, I suppose, but the fact that he hadn't even gotten onto this kind of sad.
Yeah, I didn't interview son. There's probably no doubt that he thought mom was a little bit off, right? I'm sure, but teenage kids, a parent's room, they're downstairs. I mean, they're almost blinded by it. So I don't think he knew any of that. He certainly didn't know that mom wanted to kill him. And if she would have carried out this plan or not, nobody ever knows. That's why we have the intervention. But she was pretty sound on it, and she didn't have a lot of emotion, which always scares me. When somebody's so flat and matter of fact on what they're going to do, they're typically going to do it. And that's where she was. So we ended up getting her some help, but she had some severe mental illness, no doubt.
Yeah. I don't even understand why she took the gun apart. You just said, "Hey, take it apart." She says, "Okay, I'll take it apart." Like,
well, in the interim, there's more to the story. We had talked in depth about the Glock because I heard her playing with the weapon. And I'll ask you, "Do you have any firearms?" And then she said, "Yes." And what I'm thinking at the time is she's going to commit suicide. So I asked her, are you going to kill yourself? She's like, "Or are you going to hurt yourself?" She's like, "Oh no." I said, "Are you going to hurt somebody else?" She says, "Oh yes." So then we got into her surrender. I told her we were there. She was surrounded. You're not going anywhere. So she's almost half given up at this point. Initially, she wanted to lock the gun away in a safe in her bedroom, but she couldn't get the safe open. And that's where I pivoted to taking the rack off and setting it. She wanted to put it in the safe so that nobody else got it and accidentally shot themselves. Oddly enough, she was concerned about gun safety, even though she wants to commit homicide on other people. So it was weird. She was all over the place, but that's ultimately how we got her out.
Okay, so she was kind of on the way to surrendering, okay, that makes definitely more sense.
It's a brief story, but remember, there's hours and hours in between of negotiation and talk through all this. It's not a quick process, but so lots of other information. But fascinating case, just because she actually had a picture with Hugh Hefner in her room as well. She'd done some minor actressing in Hollywood too, so it's kind of interesting that how she found her way to Alaska. I guess I don't ever know.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about 50 Shades of True Crime.
Yeah, it's a true crime book, so it's all factual cases, most of them in Alaska and cases that I physically worked. So what I did is I would tell family members and friends, they'd ask you, "What's the strangest case you ever worked?" And inevitably I would tell them bank robbery, homicide scene I had seen, negotiating with a serial killer. And not that they weren't interested in that. They'd want something really deviant and sick that I was involved in. So inevitably, as strange as it sounds, it went towards deviant sexual crimes that I worked. And they would ask more and more questions about it. And then a lot of people say, when you retire, you got to write a book about this. I didn't think I would, but I researched it, and there's no true crime books on sexual deviancy, meaning dealing with fetishes and paraphilias across the board. I mean, these are strange cases, not unique to just Alaska. I mean, we'll go from everything from necrophilia, autoerotic asphyxiation, bestiality. The book covers it all. But this happens in everyday USA, meaning where you live, your next door neighbors, your boss, your best friend. These are typically normal people in society that had these real extreme fetishes. A lot of them didn't survive them. A lot of them were caught in these fetishes. So I kind of write the book from start to finish. The first chapter is called Name That Crime. I'll show the reader a booking photo or a crime scene photo, and then I'll give 3 Alaska state statutes, and you kind of have to guess what that individual is related to. Then you read the story and see how close you were, what kind of detective you would have been.
So I'm still trying to understand. So you're saying that, so people have these kinks. Are you saying that during the process of engaging in these, someone ends up getting hurt? Is that basically the concept?
Yeah, some got hurt, some didn't. But autoerotic asphyxiation, that's where, in essence, you're regulating your breath flow for sexual stimulation. They usually use a rope in that situation and tack it, or use a nail, a light nail, to do that. And then when they lean forward, it breaks loose and they come conscious. Fortunately, a lot of times it doesn't break loose. And that's where law enforcement gets involved, because the person's deceased in that precarious situation. Family members, friends, spouse, somebody finds them, and then we get involved. So it's all across the gamut on how people die in these sexual situations. So I kind of document that in the book, but not everybody dies. There's some humorous type ones as well. But really, it's A to Z on those sexual fetishes, and they're in every community. And it's fascinating for cops who do it. Like, we all talk about it, but I think it's even more fascinating for the community that doesn't live these or see them. It's kind of secretive in our society.
All right. I know that there is the Nat Geo Alaska State Troopers show. There's also a True Detective Night Country show about Alaska and being a police officer. Do you have an opinion on any of these? How realistic are any of these shows?
Yeah, the State Troopers, it's kind of like our old cop show, same format. And they've done cops with APD before. So that's all legit. Your live cameras, interaction. The Alaska State Troopers just re-up for another season. So you're going to have some fresh new material from Alaska. So love the show. It depicts it perfectly. That's real stuff. The True Detective one you said, I've watched some of it. Again, cops are the worst for these true crime shows that aren't factual, because we'll nitpick the hell out of them. They're all done fairly well for the public, but when you're in the career, it's tough. A lot of that's filmed in Canada and other places. So what they depict's not always true. I think they're fairly well done, but again, it's tough for a cop, because you know all the nuances and you're like, that's not real. That's not real. So some of those are hard to watch. I love the live crime, such as a trooper show or cops, because that's factual. You're living it.
Yeah. Okay. So if people want to know what you do, then the Alaska State Troopers is a pretty good one. And I think when I asked you about the alcoholism in certain tribes, that I'm almost certain that's the show I saw it on. That's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll see it on that for sure.
Yeah. So I already mentioned Justin, who is a homicide detective in Mesa. His question for you is, how do you handle the adrenaline dump after a high stakes encounter, and does it affect your sleep?
Absolutely. I think I almost liken it to, you feel like you're on crack. You're just super amped up. You can't stop peeing. Like, you're just wide awake, but you've been working for 30 hours straight. You have to go to sleep. So again, I go back to working out. Like, just get that powerful workout in, exhaust yourself. You'll have an hour or so to relax and stop thinking about it. But high level negotiations were the worst, because afterwards, even though you're so exhausted, I was so wired and amped up, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So it was difficult to sleep. So you almost got to force yourself at times, but it's tough. That's one of the toughest parts of the job.
Yeah, I would imagine. And then Justin also asked, what's the most difficult thing about working a case where the victim is a child?
Everything about it. Hopefully the child's still alive. Otherwise, that's all you think about. But again, it's important because all predators are bad, but child predators who go out and victimize children, you want to get them off the streets. So whatever it takes, 24/7, you're committed to that. So no other kids are harmed. But yeah, child cases are by far the worst. I wish I would have never had to be involved in any of them. That's not realistic with your profession, but boy, it's taxing on cops, and not just me, every cop.
Since you did do some investigations, is there any cases that you didn't solve that you weren't able to come to a conclusion with that still bother you now?
I think that the torso killing I mentioned earlier, where we found those 2 torsos in our waterways, that individual is still killing or was killing. And again, when you talked about the remoteness of Alaska or finding bodies, high possibility those weren't the only 2 bodies, right? There were many, many more. And our tides are so extreme in Alaska that you'll likely never find them. So that case kind of haunts me because that individual is still killing, is dead, incarcerated, something, but we never solved that. And, so that one's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Roger, an SVU prosecutor, was on the show previously, and he asks you, do you find yourself constantly scanning rooms and exits, even when you are off the clock, such as at a restaurant or a movie?
Yeah, I think that's 100%. So I'll always sit myself to a back wall, and family or wife will be in front of me. It's just habit. I won't carry anything in my right hand. That's my traditional gun hand. So any grocery bags, even today, I'll carry in my left hand. So I think those things, I scan the room. I almost always play out a scenario on what ifs. Somebody comes in and robs the place. What would I do? It's just an automatic. You just goes through your head. Not to the point where you're, too bad, but you're very conscious of your surroundings. That's what's all cops do. We call it condition white, and that means you're oblivious to what's happening around you. You never want to be in condition white. You want to have some awareness of where you're at and what you do, exits, where your back is, things like that.
I can see why it would get ingrained into you. Did it ever end up being useful? Like, did anything ever happen anywhere that you were at where this awareness ended up helping the situation?
On duty or off duty?
Off duty.
Off duty, I don't think I've had many. Again, it'd be rare that I put myself in a situation unless it was extreme. So I've been some places where fights have, broke out, no direct robberies while I was there. And I observed, but I didn't engage unless necessary. I've never had to. But if it got serious enough, I would. But I've been pretty lucky so far.
Yeah. And did you ever, when you're in that mode and you did you ever feel like you were not 100% connected with your family? When you're having conversations and you're at a restaurant or what have you, because your brain is thinking about these things?
Yeah, good question. I think they all know it. They already know this from your history, like just being out on family outings or whether when I was working live in Anchorage and they come to dinner, they get it. They, Cop's family just knows that's the way it is. They won't even sit in those seats where you're going to sit. They just figure it and they know you're scanning. And then probably the kids got tired of me hearing how to protect themselves. And if this happened, they're like, yeah, Dad, we got it. We know. So they're aware of it. It doesn't shock them.
I guess the positive, I'm sure your family always felt we're completely safe. We were going to have no problem here at all.
Yeah. Worked good so far for sure.
All right. Roger also asks, how do you maintain a healthy marriage or relationship when you spend all day seeing the worst things that humans do to each other?
Yeah. I mean, thank God you have a loving spouse, right? So that's what you always remember. You come home, you support your wife or husband or whoever you're with. I think that's important. You talk about your day, right? I didn't hide any police work from her. She knew exactly what she did. She actually enjoys true crime, learning about cases, following. She likes the bad guy getting put in jail, right? So all good stuff. So I think it's particular to your relationship, but be open and honest and just talk through it and you'll have a long relationship. Where I found cops faltered is they didn't share it, kind of siphoned themselves off from their family, got depressed on their own. That's what your family's there for, to share and to support you, just like you support them.
Yeah. Okay. Roger also asks, is there anything frustrating about the legal system that prevents you from getting the win for a victim?
Yeah, that's 100% yes. And I'm not blaming our prosecutors or district attorneys. or state legislatures. It takes a lot of manpower to prosecute and convict criminals. But what I always found frustrating is I may have arrested somebody that has 30 or 40 convictions for a crime, and it blows my mind as to why they're still out in society wreaking havoc. Lot higher than my pay scale, right? We have governors and, prisons that are overpopulated, things like that. So I understand it. I'm not blaming anybody. That was always frustrating to me is, when you get to that point as a criminal, I'm not saying people should be incarcerated for nothing, but boy, you've proven that you can't maintain a society, but somehow we let them out and they re-victimize people victimize people that should have never been victimized. Always hard for me to take.
Yeah. All right. Okay. We're on to the speed round, which frankly has been a hit or miss so far. So hopefully we'll do well on this one. But, so just tell me, fan of, not a fan of the following things, and you can tell me why.
Sure.
And these are words that I grabbed from the internet. So they mean, a lot of these don't even mean anything to me. So hopefully they're useful for you. So number one, the snow-go.
Snow-go, I don't even know what the hell it is. And I know a lot about
it had something to do with snowmobiles, I think. So
so that's one thing. In Alaska, it's called a snow machine. If you call it a snowmobile, they know you're not from Alaska. So yeah, snow-go, snowmobile is a no-go. Snow machine only.
Okay, so snow machine, fan of, not a fan of.
Love snow machines, absolutely fan of. Nothing like it.
Okay, all right. Glock versus staccato.
I love the Glock. Huge fan. Extremely simple weapon. Not highly accurate beyond 25 yards, but boy, lethal from 25 yards in and easy to use.
Okay. Fan of or not a fan of the 24-hour sun/no sun cycle?
Boy, split. I'm split because you have 8 months of darkness and winter. And so you crave that 24-hour sunshine. So I love it both ways. It's too much at times, but we can't split it up the other way, meaning you can't go 50-50. So I'd have to say love it.
Yeah. I can't imagine what it'd be like to just have the sun all the time. So
I think cool. if you're born there, you get used to it. People that move in, you'll see they put tinfoil on their windows because all the light, but I can sleep with the window open. It doesn't bother me.
Okay. All right. Fan of, not a fan of thermal underwear?
Huge fan of. Yeah. Long johns, anything. The more layers, the better in Alaska. Otherwise, you freeze your ass off.
I got my thermal underwear on right now as for this interview. Okay. Body cams.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Cops do a perfect job 99% of the time. Nothing to hide. Document the hell out of it.
Excellent. Okay. Midnight shifts.
Hate it. Painful in your body. Hate it with a family. If I'm 21 and single, love it.
Okay. Strangers saying, thank you for your service.
Oh, if I could love it 1,000%, I would love it. Makes a huge difference. It means a lot to cops. I tell cops every day that I see around the country or in Alaska, thank you for the service. They don't know I'm a cop because I remember how much it meant to me.
All right. Mooses or meese. I don't know.
Moose is plural, either way. Love it. I love to eat them. One of the best steaks you've ever had. It's 1,600 pounds of meat. That's a big boy.
In doing your job, were they ever there as an issue? How often do you see them?
I mean, I don't want to say every day, but almost every day. And then we have a lot of vehicular accidents or moose chargings where they injure people. In an accident, we have to put the moose down. So it's countless the number of times I've had to put an injured moose down. And then we give them to charity or a list of people. And then we salvage the meat. So, a little bit in between a cow and a deer tasting on that steak, but absolutely delicious.
All right. Gas station hot dogs?
No chance in hell. Hate it.
I have no idea, but for some reason, my coworkers love to get gas station pizza. They're always going and getting this crap and bringing it back to.
Well, they might as well do the gas station sushi and add on to it. They can have it all. I don't want any of it.
All right. Right. And then the last, fan of or not a fan of, court appearances on your day off.
Well, love it, but I'm getting paid overtime. So yeah, bring it on. It's part of my job. I mean, you sign up for that. So love it.
All right. All right. That's it. That's the end of the speed round. Okay. Final question for you today. What is a secret that most people do not know about being an Alaska police officer?
I think one of the coolest things, and not just Alaska police officer, but being a police officer is, and not that jobs don't matter, but when you become a cop and you're released on your own, your job matters immediately. That very instance, you're making an impact in your community. Where some other jobs, as you go up the corporate ladder in the corporate world, you amp up your responsibilities. You learn more. You get more people under you. But being a cop, I think that was the coolest thing, is that you're in it from day one. Like, you start off full speed ahead. You have a lot of liability that you hold. You're making decisions, split-second decisions. So I thought that was the coolest thing, is that immediately day one, you're making a difference. And I'm not saying a lot of jobs don't do that. They do. But a lot of them don't. You have to build up to be able to make a difference. As a cop, you don't. You start day one.
All right. Okay. Doug Fifer, 50 Shades of True Crime. So glad that you came on the show. This has been very cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
You bet.